youthful appearance. Changwa. Changwa is like holding. Lama affection with the light of rays, your supreme knowledge, you clear the darkness of naivety from the mind, firmly please the light of confident intelligence to fully fathom the classic text of Buddha's words and their commentaries. So next, the disciples make prostration and rinse themselves. So usually we do the gektor, which is dharma offering to drive away any interfering forces. So of course the other lamas may follow the tradition as they wish, but for me personally, I think of all sentient beings to liberate all sentient beings, and therefore none of the sentient beings actually I think of as my adversaries or enemies. And so in the past, when we were in Tibet, during this kind of ritual, this part of the ritual, lamas would say that these evil forces are driven across the great ocean, and whereas today we are in India, for example, and the ocean is not that far from us, and then we would also have to, if we drive the evil forces from here, we would have to drive them towards America. So this preliminary dharma offering, ritual cake offering, to do that, I always think that I should help all sentient beings, and so I do not do this gektor, the dharma offering, to drive away the evil forces as such. So having generated the spirit of enlightenment, since we make this prayer that I call upon all sentient beings before the Buddhas to the feast of temporary and ultimate goal of enlightenment, and therefore all the gods, human, non-gods and so forth, should be joyous. So the other lamas, you may follow the tradition. In Bhutan, you have lots of sacred dance and also making torgyak offerings, the ritual cake, missile offerings, sort of. So in Tibet, we did that practice too, but nothing really helped. But instead, if we could actually think of bodhichitta, then none of the sentient beings would be considered your enemies and adversaries as to be crushed and so forth. So there's no need necessarily to do the mandala. Made this great dharma drum, dispel the miseries of sentient beings. May you live for inconceivable eons to teach the dharma. So today is what we are going to go through is a teaching that comes within the Tantra. As I made the distinction between the general structure teaching and the specialized teachings, so the rest of the teachings, like the Sutrayana, belong to this general structure teaching, whereas Tantra is a specialized teaching tailored specifically for the specific disciples and so forth, according to their disposition, mental dispositions. And so the Buddha gave the Tantric teachings. So within Tantra, there are 4 sets of Tantra, or 6 external and 6 internal Tantras, such as the Kriya Upayoga and Maha-Anu-Ati, the 3 each. So whether you call it the external Tantras or the which could refer to the Kriya Tantra and Kriya, Charya and Yoga Tantras. So these are the preliminary to the highest Yoga Tantra, the Anuttara Yoga Tantras, in which you find the specialty of the actual specialty and profundity of Tantra. So in the Prajnaparamita Sutras, it is said that everything from a physical form up to omniscient mind, everything is empty of any inherent existence, which is explained in there of Mula Madhyamaka Karika of Nagarjuna as well. And so to meditate on that emptiness, with regard to the mind that we use, we have the 2 different kinds of mind. One is the adventitious gross state, and then the other is the innate, clear light mind. The substantial condition for the Dharmakaya, the Jnanakaya of a Buddha is the innate clear light mind. And therefore, to have the complete course for Buddhahood, omniscient state, this gross state of mind cannot be the substantial cause, whereas this innate, clear light, luminous mind should be used to meditate on emptiness. So we need to think along the line that I had quoted in one of the previous days, which is to say that the peaceful, profound, peaceful, non-elaborated, and unconditioned luminosity. So we should need to think along this line, particularly luminous, unconditioned thing. And so, in Tantra, this clear light mind is also in Tantra termed as the Vajrasattva, without beginning and end. And in the Dzogchen tradition, there is the distinction made between Sem, which is the deluded mind, and the Rigpa, or the pristine awareness, is that which is not tainted by it. In Tantra, we have the isolation of body, speech, and mind. And within the mental isolation, there is the Vajra recitation, and through that, the gross wind energies are dissolved into the central channel. And so the ultimate example clear light is what is used there in this isolation, mind of mental isolation. So in Tantra, we use the innate clear light mind. It becomes active in our experience, and that is absorbed in emptiness. And so Kunken Lama Jamyang Sherpa, in his root text of the philosophical systems, although emptiness is taught in the Sutrayana, the mind, the subtlest mind that meditates on emptiness is not taught there, whereas the obscuration to knowledge is also those shown or in the Sutrayana, but the Tantra has the supreme method to overcome it. Therefore, except Tantra, that of the obscuration, the antidote, the actual antidote to the obscuration to knowledge is not taught anywhere else. And therefore, we need to study this kind of text, and then we need also to study the Shentong view, the extrinsic emptiness view. When we come to explain the clear light, the innate clear light mind, I mean, even in Guhyasamaja Tantra, there is the mention of the 4 empty states, and that actually is what Shentong is. So when we talk about Tamje Tongpa vessel, which means the emptiness of all appearances, so all emptiness, that is Shentong. When we go to the 4 empty states in the dissolution process, in short, the Jnanakaya, the wisdom body of a Buddha, is a composite phenomena, which means that it has to come through its own causes, which is similar to it, a homogeneous cause. And therefore, that cause is the innate clear light mind. Not only that, in the state of Buddhahood, there is the Sambhogakaya, the complete enjoyment body, the Nirmanakaya, emanation body, and the Dharmakaya. So these 3 bodies in the Buddhahood, state of Buddhahood, must come through their own course, which is compatible to them. And therefore, it is mentioned most clearly in Guhyasamaja Tantra, so that clear light, innate clear light mind is, which is attained at the trainee level, union state of a trainee level. For that, you need to attain that of the meaning clear light. And before that, that has to be preceded by the illusory attainment of illusory body through the accumulation of merit and wisdom. And therefore, you need also to attain that the example clear light, the final example clear light. And so there is the 3 practices, or the attainment of the physical isolation, speech isolation, and the mental isolation. So which are to purify the body, speech, and mind. So these must happen in sequence. And so, in other words, generating this clear light, the innate clear light mind, as the mind realizing emptiness, then you need to transform this clear light mind together with its mount, which is the subtlest wind energy. So these 2 are always together, and although we cannot distinguish them physically as such, but they are distinguished on the basis of conceptual understanding. And then, with regard to the Tantric practice, we use the channels and the chakras. And in the Guhyasamaja Tantra, there is the Vajra recitation. In the Mother Tantras, the Tummo, the mystic inner heat. And so this should be taken from the Mother Tantras when you do even Guhyasamaja Tantra, the Father Tantras. And then you need to use the bearing or holding the vase, the wind, and try to release those knots, the knots that are in the central channel. So one Kagyu Lama told me that to check whether you have actually accomplished the control on wind energy within yourself, you actually have a heap of sand on a table, and you point your finger towards that, and if you are able to blow the sand through the finger, that's one sign of having accomplished the control over wind energy. So there are, it's really possible if we are able to do the practices correctly. So with regard to the Tumo practice, the inner heat, even the non-Buddhists have this practice. So I was planning to go to Kumbh Mela. So in the past, when I went to Kumbh Mela, I mean, of course, there are Indian sadhus who practice a whole year in the Himalaya mountains and amongst the snow-peaked mountains. So I was thinking of having some discussions with these sadhus, meditators. So, but I felt rather these days I feel exhausted more easily, which is a sign of aging, and so I couldn't go to the Kumbh Mela. So, of course, the Vajra recitation is not there in the non-Buddhist traditions, whereas the Tumu and other practices such as the Poa, the projecting the mind out of your body, and also transference of the consciousness into another body are there. So since we do not have practitioners who have these experiences among our practitioners, I felt desperate to try to seek the assistance of the non-Buddhist practitioners. So of course we have in our text the high realizations and so forth, but if we really need to pinpoint, it seems there is not real example that we can have. I mean, people who are experienced in these high realizations and experiences, which shows the rarity of practitioners. So in Serame, you have a meditation center that you have created, which I blessed. So are there anyone practicing meditation? And the Serame abbots reported to His Holiness. There are 4 of them. So that's better than nothing. And then in Drebung Gomang also, you have set a meditation center. Are there any meditators in their place? So whatever we actually try to explain regarding the experiences, we need to support it with practitioners who have the experience. Otherwise, it would just be a lip service. And with regard to the teaching of the Buddha, it is twofold, which is the scriptural teachings as well as realizational teachings. And Master Vasubandhu says, to preserve this, there is only these 2 ways, which is study and practice. And so the Buddha Dharma should not be just lip service, but it should be integrated within oneself, so that you are able to explain the teachings extensively and profoundly through reason and so forth, as well as practice and gain experience of them. And therefore, through one's teachings and also gaining experience, we should be able to preserve the teaching of the Buddha, not through some kind of a ritual dance, charm. So in Tantra, in India, Tantra was practiced very secretly. one Lama may give teaching to his disciple very secretly, whereas in Tibet, Tantra became prevalent. It spread throughout the length and breadth of Tibet. On the one hand, we are very fortunate that we have the complete teaching of the Buddha, the Vinaya, the Sutrayana comprising the Pali and Sanskrit tradition, as well as the Tantras, all the Tantric teachings. So the profundity of Tantra must come through deity yoga practice. And so here we are going to do the blessing of Manjushri, which comes within the Kriya Tantra set. So though there are many different special deities to practice, there are these compilations called Rinjung Gyatsa and Sugar Gyatsa and so forth, Mita Gyatsa and so forth, which show all these different types of deities. So I received this Rinjung Gyatsa from Tata Rinpoche in my childhood. So there are few Manjushri blessings, permissions in it, and of them, this Manjushri that I'm giving the blessing permission is the orange Manjushri named Arapatana. So though I have not done any special retreat as such on this or practice, but since my childhood I've been doing practice on this deity. This is the tea with three inconceivables, the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, and making this offering of tea to the three inconceivables. So today the weather is clear, very clear. So Manjushri is said to be dispelling the darkness of the three worlds. I don't know if this is true, but at least in Dharamsala, the darkness has been dispelled. So here we are particularly concerned with the dispelling the darkness, inner darkness, okay? His Holiness is asking the Bhutanese Lama if he needs hot tea. So with regard to the deity yoga practice, in order to have this kind of a blessing or a permission, to have ideally to receive this kind of a permission, you need to have received a full-fledged initiation. So those who have not received any full-fledged initiation, you may visualize the deity Manjushri on your crown. So the Manjushri here is orange in color, holding in his right hand the double-edged sword, and in his left hand the scripture. So there are three Manjushris on the forehead, throat, and heart. White on the forehead or crown, and red in the at the throat, and then blue at the heart. So at these 3 points, you need to visualize these three Manjushris of your body, speech, and mind. So the Manjushri and the Lama from whom you are receiving this initiation has to be visualized and imagined as the embodiment of all three objects of refuge. So from the Manjushri, the Manjushri that you imagine should be imagined as a deity who has the ability, the capability, the power to dispel all your darkness of ignorance from one's mind stream. And so I do the practice of the combined practice of peaceful and wrathful Manjushri every day. And so these four types of intelligence or wisdom, the great wisdom, or vast wisdom, and clear, profound, and the swift wisdom are really something that you can accomplish if you really do practice on Manjushri. This is from my own experience. I can tell this. When this happens, your intelligence doesn't go astray. It becomes a good, positive intelligence. So through the blessing of Manjushri, when you critically analyze scriptures, you'll be able to analyze them correctly. And this also helps in developing your wisdom to develop bodhichitta, which leads one to that of the state of omniscience. So it's something really unique, uncommon. So we as human beings have this marvelous brain, unique. So this is something that we have naturally, and in order to be able to see things from a wider perspective and also in depth, see things in depth, you need, these are the different wisdoms. The profound wisdom is that wisdom with which you can actually make decisions, saying this is this because of this and that. And similarly, to see things from a wider perspective without losing sight of the goal and so forth is that of the vast wisdom and so forth. So as human beings, if we are able to think of the welfare of other sentient beings, you will see that the benefit of it. This is helped by wisdom, your intelligence. Whereas if you remain closed-minded, selfish, you can see how it harms yourself. So if we are able to develop wisdom and intelligence to a greater extent, then we'll see how we can overcome the problems that beset the world today. Lots of killings of human beings, and therefore the narrow-mindedness that we have should be overcome through wisdom. And so here, so when we talk about wisdom or intelligence, it is that discernment which sees things correctly. So it's not just in relation to the dharma as such, the religion, but anything. So if we are able to look at the world today, the materialistic world is what we are actually indulging in, but this is not enough. To see that this is not enough, we need wisdom. And therefore, through the blessing of Manjushri, if you are able to develop your wisdom further and further to actually make discern what is right, and it will really help even the world at health. If I may boast about something, although I am in my 80s, I still have a very bright, I'm still bright. So why this is so is because I have been reciting Manjushri mantra since my childhood. On the one hand, it may be blessing also of Manjushri. Avalokiteshvara has no choice but to give me blessings because Manjushri wields his sword. And if we are to compete the Manjushri sword with the Vajrapani's Vajra, the Manjushri sword would win. So from my experience, I'm certain that the Manjushri has a special role in developing one's intelligence and wisdom. So understanding this, please repeat these. So please bestow me this, the treasure of wisdom, this supreme intelligence. So next is bodhisattva vows, taking the bodhisattva vows. So in order for the Buddha Dharma to really become a teaching of the Buddha, without taking refuge, it's very difficult for that to happen. Whereas to make the Mahayana teaching an actual Mahayana teaching itself, the Bodhisattvas, Bodhisattvayana, without the bodhichitta, it doesn't become a Mahayana dharma as such. So we need actually to understand this, that this has to do with your mind. So the Lama should be visualized as Manjushri, and in the altar also you should imagine there is Manjushri. And so imagining the space, the Buddha Shakyamuni, surrounded by the 7 successors to the Buddha, the 6 ornaments and 2 sublime masters, and the 16 arahats. Regarding them, I'm quite hard-headed when it comes to talking about the 16 arahats. They have not written any text that can help the Buddha Dharma. How do they then serve the Dharma? There's one verse which is said to be ascribed to Rahula, which is the praise to the perfection of wisdom, the mother of all the Buddhas. So there's no teaching that we can actually find that has come from the 16 arahats. So who are the ones who actually has left a legacy for in the teaching of the Buddha? So there are the masters like Manjushri, Master Nagarjuna, and so forth. So Master Nagarjuna and his disciples, and then Master Asanga and his disciples and followers, and those of Dignaga and Dharmakirti. So the preservation and the promotion of the Buddha Dharma has been done by these great masters of India. I really admire them. Of course, we do a lot of recitation of the prayer to the 16 arahats. It may be helping the Dharma, but they don't really have any writings of themselves. Maybe the 16 arahats have to do with what the Chinese tradition do. So in Chinese tradition, the monks have their robes with sleeves, and so the Chinese masters may have been practiced by the Chinese, the 16 elders may have been practiced by the Chinese masters, but I don't know if there are any cooks amongst them, the 16 arahats, because they need also to take tea and food as well, don't they? So the 17 Nalanda masters also surround the Buddha, and together with it, there's Master Mahasiddha Saraha and so forth. And then the Nyingma masters of the Tibetan traditions, the Khenlop Chösum, King Chösung Detsen, Guru Padmasambhava, and the master, the Abbot Chandrakshita, and then Sakya Lamdre, Tsokshin Lobshe lineage masters, and then the Kagyu masters, all the 4 in major and 8 minor Kagyu traditions, and then the Kadam masters, the old Kadam tradition, Choje, Adisha, and so forth, and Master Tsongkhapa and his followers, the Kadams, the new tradition of the Kadams, and then also those of the Puluk, the Pudin's tradition, and so forth, and Jonang. So imagine all the objects of refuge complete in the space. So with this in mind, you do the practice of taking refuge in them, confessing your misdeeds, and rejoicing in the good deeds of all beings, and then take the bodhisattva vows. So all joys in the world, joys and happiness in the world come from thinking of others' well-being, whereas all sorrows and misery come from thinking only of one's own well-being. And so what needs is there more to say? Look at the Buddhas who have reached enlightenment, and those of us who are remained in samsara. And so if you are really full of concern. I mean, if you think, full of that altruistic attitude, thinking of the benefit of others, you will be relaxed, and you will really have a true peace of mind. And so, Master Shantideva says, which intelligent person would despair to ride the horse of bodhichitta, which leads one from bliss and bliss? So although bodhichitta may be difficult in the beginning, but if you study Bodhisattvacharya Avatara by Shantideva, you will see that of course this is possible to develop, and so you will have that courage. And so you need to therefore reflect on and think and contemplate bodhicitta, and in order to be able to do that, you need also again to have this kind of human intelligence, and wisdom must support it. And so as human beings, being born as human beings, we have met with the dharma, and so think that you will make this life a worthy one, and therefore to serve. You should also think of serving the Buddha Dharma through the practice of bodhicitta and the wisdom of emptiness, which is what the bodhisattvas and the Buddhas have done, and therefore they are able to help sentient beings. And therefore, with this in mind, so first, as they also, the bodhisattvas and Buddhas in the past, have developed bodhicitta, and then trained themselves in the bodhisattva practices, likewise I will do so. So as it is found in Bodhisattvacharya Avatara, you should have from the depths of your heart the faith in these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And so if you really believe in this, then you should first develop that of a bodhicitta and take bodhisattva vows. And so please kneel on your right knee. If you have bad legs, that's an exception. Please repeat. I seek refuge in the three jewels. I confess all misdeeds individually. I rejoice in the virtues of all beings. I take to mind Buddha's enlightenment. To the Buddha Dharma in the highest assembly, I seek refuge until I reach enlightenment. To fulfill the interests of oneself and others, I shall generate the mind for awakening. Having generated the mind for highest awakening, I shall invite all sentient beings as my guests. I shall engage in the delighting supreme practices of enlightenment. May I attain Buddhahood to benefit all sentient beings. So, In this text, we find mentioned to fulfill the interests of oneself and others, I should generate the mind for awakening. So to fulfill one's own goal or the goal of others, there's nothing, no other factor than bodhichitta that we can practice. And then the text also says, I shall invite all sentient beings as my guests. So having generated bodhichitta, you are saying that you should pledge that from this day on, I will work for the benefit of others. So there's nothing else that I should do other than serving sentient beings and leading them to higher rebirth and finally to that of the Buddhahood. So I shall invite all sentient beings as my guests. I shall engage in the delightful supreme practices of enlightenment. So delightful means that it is the bodhisattva practices are those which only help sentient beings. So just as I shall lead all sentient beings to the Buddhahood, I will also seek to attain Buddhahood. And as Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, as my witness, I pledge that I will engage in the practices of Bodhisattvas, the 6 paramitas and so forth. Please repeat for the second time. I seek refuge in these rituals. I confess all misdeeds individually. I rejoice in the virtues of all deep beings. I take to mind Buddha's enlightenment. To the Buddha Dharma and His highest assembly, I seek refuge until I am enlightened. To fulfill the interests of oneself and that I should generate the mind for awakening. Having generated the mind for highest awakening, I shall invite all sentient beings as my guests. I shall engage in the delightful supreme practices of enlightenment. May I attain Buddhahood to benefit all sentient beings. So having said it 2 times, at the end of the 3rd repetition, when you say to fulfill the interests of oneself and others, I should generate mind, this awakening mind, that is the aspirational bodhicitta, and having generated that highest awakening, I shall invite the sentient beings and engage in the delightful supreme practice of enlightenment, is that of may I attain Buddhahood, and so forth, is that of engaging bodhicitta. Please repeat. I seek refuge in the rituals. I confess all misdeeds individually. I rejoice in the virtues of all beings. To the Buddha Dharma and Highest Assembly, I seek refuge until I reach enlightenment. To fulfill the interests of oneself and others, I shall generate the mind for awakening. Having generated the mind for highest awakening, I shall invite all sentient beings as my guests. I shall engage in the delighting supreme practices of enlightenment. May I attain Buddhahood to benefit all sentient beings. Next. Today my life has borne fruit. I have attained an excellent human existence. Today I am born into the Buddha's family, and now I have become a Buddha's child. Now come what may, I shall act in accord with this lineage, never causing this impeccable noble lineage to be tarnished. Please sit down. As it is said in the Bodhisattva Charyavatana, with regard to the benefits and the great qualities of bodhicitta. So finding bodhicitta is like finding a treasure amongst the garbage and so forth. And also bodhicitta is like the sun that dispels the darkness of the whole world, and it is like the butter that is churned from the milk of the ocean of dharma and so forth. So if you really consider others to be your friends rather than enemies, I mean, you will not really find them disturbing or anything. And so for your physical health, well-being, it really, bodhicitta helps. And those who are lost in or fatigued on the path of existence, for them, bodhicitta is like this, the cool, the shade, for a tree that gives a cool shade. And so, if you really dedicate yourself for others, then you will really find yourself to be, as if in in this state of peacefulness. Although physically you may be in samsara, in your mind you are as if in liberation. It is that moon that gives the cool light for those who are fatigued on the traveling on the samsara path. And so bodhichitta is that which satisfies all your guests, the sentient beings. Now, to set the basis for the blessing, what that means is it's not enough just to have faith in the three jewels, and not enough also just to have bodhichitta. So because we are dealing with Tantra here, you need to train your mind to overcome clinging and appearance of clinging to the appearance of ordinariness of oneself and the others. And so this gross body should not be held precious or anything. Although the subtle mind and wind are not yet manifest in us, but in your visualization, you should actually this gross body and mind should go out of your perception. But by using the gross mind, the different appearances dissolve. And so because you are meditating on emptiness, your mind is absorbed in emptiness, then that mind arises. From there arises that mind arises into the deity. And so that's what is meant by setting the basis for the practice. So here it's good to say the Om Swabhava mantra. Yesterday we crossed the three syllables A, U, and Ma, which make up Om. And so these three letters within Om, A, U, and Ma represents body, speech, and mind. And Swabhava Shuddha means inherently pure or purified. So what that shows is that of the selflessness of persons. And in order to be able to realize fully, you need to develop that of the self-understanding or insight into the selflessness of phenomena as well, without which you cannot have the full understanding and insight into selflessness of persons. So this is very clearly mentioned in the commentary to Madhyamaka Avatara by Master Tsongkhapa. And so Sarva Dharma means all phenomena. So all phenomena here refers to the basis for the designation of a person, mainly the five aggregates and so forth. And then Swabhava Shuddhahang means, so all these aggregates and so forth also are empty, inherently empty of any, empty. So think along this line and meditate on emptiness, Swabhava mantra. And then what brings out the profundity of Tantra is Shunyata Jnana. So Shunyata means emptiness, and Jnana refers to that subjective wisdom or mind which ascertains that of the emptiness. So when your mind is totally absorbed in emptiness, then the gross states of mind will cease. So Shunyata Jnana, so that mind which ascertains the emptiness. Next comes the Vajra, which means indivisible. So what that means is that this mind is totally, almost absorbed in emptiness. So it's not like the mind being absorbed in emptiness of a vase as such, but the mind itself is empty, and that emptiness of the mind are of the same nature. They are inseparable. You cannot separate these two from each other. And so, right from the beginning, the mind, when the mind comes into existence, its emptiness also is there. And so, the mind itself is absorbed in its own emptiness. So, Shunyata Jnana Swabhava, it shows the emptiness. And then Shunyata Jnana refers to that mind, and Vajra refers to that very mind which is meditating or absorbed in its own emptiness. Swabhava means its own nature. So the mind is absorbed in its own final nature, which is empty. So that is when you meditate on that emptiness, you are having a divine pride, or so you are holding a divine pride when your mind is totally dissolved in the emptiness of itself. So you have received the teaching on emptiness the last few days. So if you really have something to show off it here. So meditate on emptiness. So the two selflessnesses, personal and phenomena. So from within that meditation on emptiness, the disciples, wherever you are, at your heart, there is a light tent or circle at your heart, from within which there is a D syllable, and it emits rays of light. So that your the darkness of ignorance is dispelled or cleansed, and make offering to the Buddhas, which is the offering of practice, which is the highest offering that you can make. So if you meditate on emptiness, and meditation on emptiness and meditation on bodhichitta, or cultivation of bodhichitta, are the supreme offerings that you can make to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So those of you who have received full-fledged initiations before, from within that state of emptiness, this D syllable transforms into yourself as the Manjushri, holding in your right hand this double-edged sword, and at your in your left hand you are holding this stem of flower, upala flower, on which is a scripture. So those of you who are engaged in studying philosophical texts, whatever text you are studying, you should imagine that sitting on the upala flower, and you are sitting in full cross-legged position. On your crown, you are adorned with Akshobhya as your lineage lord. So you have taken you have generated bodhichitta and taken bodhisattva vows, and then you have meditated on the emptiness. So this they make up for the both the extensive and the profound paths. And so having meditated yourself as a Manjushri, just as I have introduced to you, you should also imagine a similar Manjushri in the altar, where there is a tombu, which is like a heap of flower. So from the Manjushri on the crown, then you imagine innumerable Manjushris coming out and emanating, and they dissolve into you. So if you are able to meditate on emptiness, I mean, it would really, and also combine it with bodhichitta. And of course, there is a basis for receiving this blessing. So from the heart of the Lama comes forth this Manjushri and dissolves into you, and thereby you are blessed. So Zahum Bam Ho, you with this you dissolve. I mean, the Manjushri dissolves into you, finally. And then at the heart of both the Lama and the disciples, there is a wheel with the four spokes. So at the center of it is Om, and then the four spokes have A, Ra, Ba, Za. In the center is Om and A, and then Ba, Ra, Ba, Za, Na are on the four spokes. And so the chain of mantra comes from the Guru's heart and enters you through your mouth. So this chain of mantra at the Guru's heart comes up his body, out of his mouth, and enters the disciple's mouth and are placed at your heart. So Om and A are at the center, and then Ra, Pa, Za, Na are in the four directions. So please repeat. From the mouth, from the Lama's heart comes that of the mantra up his body, out of his mouth, and then they come to you and enter your mouth and placed at your heart. And thereby you receive the blessings of the four kinds of intelligence or wisdom. The vast, clear, profound, and that of the swift wisdom. Thereby you receive the blessings so that you go. Please repeat. Omara Bhajanadi, Omara Bhajanadi. Omara Bhajanadi. Please repeat this 21 times together. Omara Bhajanadi, Omara Bhajanadi, Omara Bhajanadi, Omara Bhajanadi, Omara Bhajanadi, Omara Bhajanadi. Omara Bhajanadi, 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 Omara Bha Marabazanadi, 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 Marabazanadi. So that you receive the blessing, so that you are blessed to tread through the five-tiered path, culminating in Buddhahood, for the sake of all sentient beings. So those of you who have not received the full-fledged initiation, you may imagine Manjushri sitting on your crown. So whether you have generated yourself into the Manjushri or not, at your throat, you should imagine D, which is pointing inwards, and at your heart also you should have imagine D syllable, and let us all repeat this D syllable in one breath. Please take in a deep breath, and then in one breath recite this Om Arabazana. $108 times, and then the D at your throat dissolves into the at the heart, and so this helps in retentive memory, and you gain an unforgettable memory. In order to reach omniscient state, it should be based on wisdom. So the ultimate Manjushri is your wisdom, and then the conventional or the provisional Manjushri is the deity Manjushri appearing. And so please say this, Master, please pay attention to me. I, known by this name, from this time onwards until I reach enlightenment, I will take Manjushri as my meditation deity, and on a daily basis, I will recite his mantra 100 times each day. Please, Master, pay attention to me. From now on, until I reach enlightenment, I shall consider Manjushri as my meditational deity and recite his mantra 100 times. Master, please pay attention to me. From now until I reach enlightenment, I will consider take Manjushri as my meditation deity and recite his mantra 100 times each day. So next is giving blessing. So you have promised to take Manjushri as your meditation deity, and the Master also gives that permission. So that's all. Please repeat. I shall pay heed to your whatever you have instructed to me. From now on, I give myself to you. Please take me as your disciple. So this completes the Arapajana in permission. So on a daily basis, you should recite the Arapajana mantra at least 100 times, and if you get spare times to do retreat, you should be able to do that. So the most important thing is on a daily basis that you should use the critical analytical meditation. So this really is the factor which can transform you. So of course, after having done analytical meditation and having ascertained what you are meditating on, well, then you should do the fixation, the single-pointed concentration practice, so that you are combining both the single-pointed concentration and vipassana. So this time we had the teaching on Bhavaviveka's text, of which I have deliberately asked Khenpo Rinpoche Kungao Wangchuk to write the book, the annotated commentary, and received it from him. So this I consider as service and contribution to the teaching. I'm also serving Master Bhavaviveka, who is one of the 17 Nalanda masters, and then there is the on top of the Madhyamaka Karika's 400 verses and Madhyamaka Avatara, we have Chandarakshita's ornament of the middle way, and now that we also have the text by Bhavaviveka, Madhyamaka Hridaya, and so that we have these texts make up the complete set of texts written by Madhyamaka masters. So, of course, we would say that we are all follower of the Prasangika Madhyamaka. In Bhavaviveka's text, he says that we assert that a person's identity is finally that of the mental consciousness. But we reject that as Prasangika Madhyamakas. So in his commentary to Madhyamaka Avatara, where he says that this profound emptiness is will be understood only by those who follow the Madhyamaka Master Nagarjuna's system correctly, and not others, even though they may be very well learned. And in his commentary, he mentions Master Asanga and Bandhu. So when you understand that things have no, when you understand the Prasangika Madhyamaka philosophical the emptiness view, what this actually does is destroys all objectification of things. So in order to see the profundity of the higher philosophical systems, you need also to understand the lower systems well. I find Master Bhavaviveka to be very kind because of his commentary, the lamp of wisdom, Buddha Palita, criticizing Buddha Palita, Chandrakirti could come up with his critique of Bhavaviveka very clearly and precisely in his Prasanapada. So when you do this kind of critical analysis very thoroughly, then you will actually gain better insights into the real understanding of Madhyamaka. When I was receiving teaching from Gen Nyima Rinpoche, and he explained to me on Teldok, which is the consequence of the opposite, and so for about 2 months after his explanation, it really gave me some kind of a special feeling on. So the Indian masters' texts are really helpful to dispel all kinds of doubts about the clinging to true existence. So the teaching discourse on the Madhyamaka Hridaya is completed very successfully this time, and at the end we have a very nice weather. as I said before, about dispelling the darkness of the three worlds. So I hope to see you again. And if I feel physically healthy, I will come to Drepung. So Drepung Gomang and Drepung Losaling, as well as Gadin Shatse and Changze abbots, have already given their invitation to me, a request for me to come to South India. So if I feel healthy, I hope to see you in South India. So that's all. Whatever merit I have created, may it help to serve the dharma, and particularly the teaching, the tradition of Tsongkhapa. Dachi Sho. Now, let us say the prayer called Rabjam Gyawa.